I think we all know that something is wrong. If you're over 20 years old, you have some idea that America is not what it was. In fact, it is not what it was not very long ago. And yet this transformation has been occurring for a very long time in our country. But they are now moving into a final phase for creating this land as an outpost of world government. That process is brought to us through a program, an action plan called Agenda 21, or Sustainable Development. And I can report to you that after 20 years of beginning implementation, the action plan of Agenda 21 is now firmly entrenched in every county in America. Later today, I'll explain a little bit on how that has come to pass. But today is an exciting day because if we look at California and look at Siskiyou and look at the Bay Area, we can see two prototypes of exactly how the Agenda 21 program has been designed to restructure America. Unfortunately, I don't see any Agenda 21 maps here today. Is there one available, Ben?
We can pull it up.
Okay, I think that would be a good idea. But when you see this map later in the day, you'll see massive red areas. And these red areas constitute what's called the Wildlands Project. We're going to have speakers today who talk about aspects of the Wildlands Project. Certainly the reintroduction of wolves are part of the implementation of the Wildlands Project, which is designed to drive people out of those areas. Dam destruction is a tool used by globalists to drive people out of rural areas. And then, of course, there's the smart growth development plans, which are encompassed by plans like One Bay Area, which takes 9 counties, 7.5 million people, and completely restructures their lives with the aid of over $250 billion, mostly federal dollars, designed to restructure how people in urban areas live. And in short, that's about stack and pack housing, where people use bicycles and their feet to transport themselves from their jobs to their homes on the 32nd floor. This is the design that has now captured all of America's political interests. Democrat or Republican, it does not much matter, because the commitment from those people in Washington, D.C. is toward the making of America as an outpost of the New World Order. Well, today we're going to gain some valuable information from these 3 speakers. Our first speaker is Casey Anderson. Casey is an Idaho rancher who's concerned with the stresses and impact that wolves have on cattle. I don't know this for a fact, but in Bay Area newspapers or on the web, I've forgotten exactly where I read this. One wolf has been reported to have crossed the Oregon border into Siskiyou. Many wolves are not far behind. We know that wolves run in packs. So the wolf issue is an important issue for people here and across the country to understand, because wolves make a perfect wildlands area. How many people want to put their children on the same landscape where there are big, mean, vicious Canadian wolves roaming around? So, Mr. Anderson is going to, he's been a lifetime rancher, first in Oregon and now in Idaho. And he's going to talk to us about government efforts to put GPS locators on these wolves as they move around the western United States. Casey?
I grew up in northeast Oregon, Pendleton, Pilot Rock area. I've been involved in ranching all my life. And I was approached back in 2007 to participate in a wolf cattle interaction study. And it was started through the Oregon State University, along with the Oregon Beef Council, put up the initial seed money because they wanted to know the implications of what happens when the wolves come into Oregon. And through the ARS, which is the Agricultural Research Service. So I felt the ranch that I was on was a perfect fit because we were starting to have some issues that we didn't really understand. And the thing with the wolves is everybody gets to start from zero. We're all naive. And we want to try to pass off some of the things that are happening to the cattle and habits to experiences that we've had in the past, either mountain lions or coyotes or something else. And so we all start naive. And so that's kind of my beginning on this is, you know, by some of the scientific stuff that's been shown here with through this study, I hope that you folks can come out with some information way ahead of what I had to deal with when I first started. This slide just indicates the red dots. In 1999, the red dots are the established wolf packs in the northern Rocky Mountains. In 6 years, it went from about, well, you can see, in 6 years, there's that many more established packs in a 6-year period. We go to the next one, and then they're off over into the top part of Washington and down in Oregon. And of course, it's old news that, you know, one of these wolves that were in Wallowa County has made it all the way down to Northern California. So the population of the wolves exponentially increases. You know, it's just their nature, and they do a real good job at it. Along with that, you see you start out there in 1995, over on this graph, and there's 14 wolves. And in 2008, they estimated the population of wolves in Idaho was 856. The only ones that they are counting and monitoring are packs that have collars on so they can track them and actually count the other members of the pack. So best estimates, we were probably experiencing at least twice as many wolves as that's officially reported there. And so, you know, in Idaho, we were supposed to have a maximum of 15 breeding pairs and 150 wolves in the state before they came off the endangered species list. Once we met that, see, we actually met it clear back here in 1999 in the state of Idaho. But that's just when the lawsuits start, and they just keep moving the goalposts farther and farther away. And I contend that if we could have lived up to the initial agreement, we wouldn't be talking about cattle depredation losses and things like that. Because in the beginning, the humans displaced the wolves on the landscape. But with the federal government being involved and reintroducing the wolves, and it's exactly like the previous speaker said, they're using this as a way that the wolves are going to displace us on the land because of the protection they put on and things like that. Okay, right along with that, started out with the depredations down here, and they just kept escalating. And the most important part of this graph is if you see that there was 200 confirmed kills of sheep, and down here there's only like 100 confirmed cases of cattle depredations. And you think, okay, well, that's not much. We can just pay for those losses and it's no big deal. The real problem comes is how do you identify and confirm a depredation? And the sheriff in Wallowa County had made a comment at a presentation that I was at, and he said he can collect enough evidence to convict a person of murder far easier than he can collect evidence to prove that the wolf was involved in the depredation of the livestock loss. And I use this slide because this is a perfect example for a depredation to be confirmed, you have to show blunt trauma, bloodshot areas with a certain bite pattern, and have that bloodshot area to prove that the animal was alive when the wolf killed it. Okay? If they kill a calf like this, and they just happen to eat that, your evidence is gone. This calf was killed probably 4 o'clock in the morning. We found it at about 5:30 in the morning, and this is what's left. The whole scene was covered with wolf tracks and wolf manure. And what we've seen in our operation is that if the cow fights the wolves off, even if the wolves kill the calf, but if the cow succeeds on fighting the calf off, the cow will be there at the site. But once the wolves kill the calf and start eating on it, the cow will leave and she won't come back to that site. And that's exactly what happened here. This is a probable, this is not a confirmed kill. And that's why the numbers on that chart previous was the way they were. Our ranch is located in this area right along the Snake River and up towards Council, Idaho, west central mountains. And in 2009, this area, what they call the McCall-Weiser zone, was the second highest depredation in the state of Idaho. Since then, we have actually surpassed, and we are now the #1 depredation area for livestock losses in the state of Idaho. And if you look, in our area there, it said right here, so we are basically 21 to 30 confirmed depredations. Well, in 2009, we had, I want to say 21 confirmed cases on our ranch alone. Okay? We were missing 70 head of calves when we came in, 5 cows, 2 yearlings, and a bull. But they were just gone. They're not confirmed, but that's what it is. So basically on our ranch, and what has happened through the time is that people give up reporting the losses because nothing's happening. And so a lot of people just don't even say it anymore. There's been ranchers around the Riggins, Whitebird area that have just sold their cattle because they just don't want to deal with it anymore. This is the area of the study. Snake River runs up through here. Oxbow Dam, Hells Canyon Dam is on down, and so this is the area that we're in on this study. We established a scat route, and that would be these blue lines on this map. And we would take pictures and GPS points of each scat that we found. And there was times in a 2-day period that there could be as many as 20 new piles of wolf scat on a 6-mile stretch of road. Most of it was black hair or white hair, which we run mainly Angus and Charolais cross cows. This here is part of the study. These are confirmed sightings of wolves in 2009. And this is through the APHIS, Animal Control Division of the USDA, the government trapper. And so we can go into that program, like here where that little deal is, and it'll bring up the GPS points, how it was seen. It was from a plane. They sighted 12 wolves, 1 was collared, and 11 others, and gives the date. And so we could pull that up on any one of these sightings and have documentation of the number of wolves and where they were exactly at. This is where wolves were killed, and at that point there was 4 wolves killed by the government trapper that day, and 2 males, 2 females. This came after prolonged depredations on the ranch, and they felt that they had to really start working on these wolves to slow them down. In 09, we actually removed 15 wolves off of the ranch alone. Along with this same study is where the confirmed depredations took place. This one happened to be right down on the Snake River, and it was a heifer, yearling heifer, and this is what you may have to have. When this originally happened, this was a couple weeks after the fact, and so this whole thing would have been a huge bloodshot area, and then it just rots and falls out. But you can see all the bite marks here, and actually ate over half of the udder off of this yearling heifer. There's another picture of it. And this is her front shoulder. This is another way they identify it with the wolves. You've got the bite patterns and the space of the canine teeth, and there's areas that the wolves really work on. Front shoulders, flanks, hamstring. That's where a lot of these bites are going to be. And of course you end up with a yearling that you can't sell. She's missing 10 pounds of round steak, and you can't breed her because she doesn't have an udder anymore. And so there you go. In this study we took 10 head of cows in a herd of about 450 and collared them, and they're collared on a 5-minute intervals to see how they use the landscape, and the initial part of the study was that we would collar wolves and see how that interaction takes place. One of the things that the scientists had talked about is, well, you're only going to collar 10 cows, they're all going to be in a blob, you won't see how the distribution is. And so I'm going to click through these slides real quick. Each cow is a different color, and I'm going to show you how the distribution works. There's cow number 2 along with cow number 1. And I'm just going to go through these real quick, and you'll see how them cattle will use different areas. And this is why some of this information is sensitive. You see this area here? That's outside of our allotment. And so this cow went on a walkabout. And that's one reason we have some of this is kind of sensitive, because if Forest Service looked at that, well, that cow was trespassing, and that can't work, So there's 9 head of the cows, there's 10 head of the cows. And that's in 08, the first year that we had them collared. And this is the picture in 09 of all the cows together. I'm just going to bring a little quick deal. This is a big chunk of private ground that we have. That's where we run our first and second calf heifers. And none of those cows were collared. But yet, that is where the majority of our depredations took place, confirmed depredations, is because those were the cows that were really being able to see in a basis quick enough to be able to get a positive confirmation on the depredation losses. This slide is really interesting as we went through the different years. And you're talking about cattle distribution. This year in 08 is when we had our first confirmed depredation. And you'll notice how all the cows had used this area. And then in 09 we had the red dots is actual GPS points of the collared wolf that we had. And so this whole pack of 12 wolves was in this group of cattle. And they just mashed these cows up against the private land, which was fenced. And the cows changed their whole habit. They're wanting to get away. They're wanting to say, hey, let's get out of here. So we removed 15 wolves in 09. We went back to moderate wolf pressure in 10, and look how the distribution of the cattle reverted. And then by 2011, we had other wolf packs that moved in. We had heavy wolf pressure again, and now all the cattle are bunched up against the private land again. So I don't know how many of you are involved in range management and cattle distribution, but you know, that's a huge issue. And when you have a resource and the cattle aren't out there using that resource, it makes management really, really tough. I just felt this is a really important slide to show. This just shows all the cow positions and the wolf sightings. So we got a wolf collar in '09, and this is just some of the basic information. This was analyzed on 190 days. His average minimum daily travel was basically 11.4 miles. The least he traveled was 4.7 miles. The most he traveled was 27.5 miles. So these things, and remember, this country we're in is extremely rugged, steep, timbered. They can travel a lot of distance. This is the actual GPS points of the wolf. It shows his area. That you know, they have an area where they stay, and I mean, you can draw a line across it, and he don't cross that line. Pretty amazing. If you go a little farther, the perimeter is 55.3 miles. The area 210. So it's a large area that they occupy. And this was one pack. We have another pack that works in this area and another pack that's down here. But those wolves weren't collared. We didn't have a GPS collar on there. There's your a 2-week period, and it shows how the wolves will travel, the distance they travel. And this is more than likely has to do with their eating patterns. So when they got a full stomach, they're not moving much. When they got an empty stomach, they're moving a lot more. This is reasonably interesting too. You wonder, well, what time of the day do they do their most traveling? This is on a 24-hour day along the bottom. And so 1 o'clock down to about 9 o'clock in the morning, they're laying around during the middle of the day, and then it just starts peaking late evening. So that's when most of the activity takes place. This is an actual pattern of about a 2-week period of the wolf that was collared. This is the actual den site, and these are the tracks that he went out and traveled back. You can see from the terrain, it's steep country. Some of these draws that they're crossing, there's probably at least a 2,000-foot elevation change in probably less than a half a mile. It's a steep, rugged country. This shows part of that private ground where the first calf heifers were and how much time he spent in there. This is an area where our second calf heifers were, and he made quite a few loops around in there. This is the second 2-week period. That's the same den site, and it shows different rendezvous sites that they go to, and his pattern changed a little bit in that 2 weeks. It's just pretty fascinating. You remember, this is just one wolf. He is not the alpha male. He's not the alpha female. He's just a male, but yet he's traveling back to the den site helping take care of a litter of pups. All the little red dots here are occupied houses, residents of people. And you can see that most of the confirmed depredations are right where the houses are. That year I actually shot one wolf right there, and my hired man shot one right there in the middle of the night when they were in a group of first calf heifers. After he shot that one, the following day the government trapper showed up at daylight, and there was 5 wolves right along in this irrigated ground here in the middle of 200 head of heifers, and they was able to shoot, I think, 3 more wolves out of there. And then the Fish and Game shut us off, said you won't have any more problems. You know, we've removed 5 wolves. Well, the next morning there was more depredations right here. So it really don't affect it much, and especially close proximity to houses and people. And this just shows the overlap. The red is the cattle, and the yellow is the way the wolf had traveled. This also shows in the blue where the wolf and the cows came into real close proximity to one another at the same exact time. And of course we can do that with the GPS. You know exactly when it is. This is the first confirmed depredation we had on the ranch. We had a couple hundred head of first calf heifers, and we were moving them just out of about a 600-acre pasture over into another pasture just through a gate. We get down there, and of course we had some calves run back, a couple cows, no big deal. So getting close to noon, so we just let them go, went to lunch, came back, and this collared female came in right there in the middle of the day, and about a dozen calves were sitting up under a lone pine tree, and picked the biggest, healthiest one out of the batch and grabbed it and drug it down. You could just see the marks in the ground where she grabbed this calf, and that calf drugged that wolf about 12 feet, and then that was the end of it. And you think the whole pelvis and everything is gone right there. We probably rode up and scared her off and didn't even know it. But they eat right down through the bones and all. This is the same calf. You can see that hole there. On the back side of that round, there isn't even a fang mark. But yet, as the government trapper skinned this out, that whole area is bloodshot. You could poke a beer bottle clear through that round. And that's, again, just the cows in white, the area of the wolf in red. This shows the GPS points of the wolf in proximity to houses. We have a lodge right here that we run some guided snowmobile trips out in the winter, and hunting and fly fishing and things like that. And there's a residence there also. And these wolves, you know, by seeing this data, this is some of the questions. Well, does it really help if there's people around? And no, it don't. This is that same area, the lodge, residence. This group of wolves sat right there above a county road and stayed there all day. And actually had wolf manure in the garden right there. And you got to remember, this wolf with his GPS collar is only recording the data every 15 minutes. Wolf can go a long ways in 15 minutes. So there it just shows the aerial photo. 350 meters away is where they spent all day. And again, this is just kind of quick. There's a picture of where the wolves was in the lodge and the house. And that's County Road. There's people driving on it, but the wolves just stayed right there all day. This is another house just up the draw. And you think, okay, well, how many times did they come in there? Well, they came within 500 meters of that house 307 times. And there's another house right there, and there's another house right there. Now, if that was your house, nah, they wouldn't come in. This is kind of interesting too. This shows the wolf patterns of when we had some confirmed depredations. And these were depredation sites in our first calf heifers, depredation sites, second calf heifers. And that collared wolf was involved. Now this doesn't prove anything. He might not have killed him, but he was there watching. This is on the exact day of the depredations. Depredations in turquoise. He left the den site, traveled up here to the first calf heifers, killed one, maybe not him, maybe it was his friend. went up here to a rendezvous site so we could watch the ranch and stuff, then came over here and it was involved in that depredation at the same time. Kind of fascinating how that works. And so part of it is how many times do these cows come into contact with the collared cows? We had 743 encounters of that one wolf within a 500-meter period, or closeness to the collared cows. Every single cow came into contact with this wolf. All right, now there's 12 wolves in that pack. So you take 743 times 12, and there's 450 cows, so you multiply that by 450 cows. How many times are these wolves interacting with the cows? I need a calculator. A lot. And that's how come the behavior patterns of the cattle change and things like that. It's just amazing how many times. Some cows came into contact a lot of times. So, and this shows how many times they came into contact. See, that cow right there came into contact within 500 yards 140 times. That's pretty amazing. Now, cow 08 and 022, both of those cows lost calves. Okay? Now, this is kind of rough math, but there's 10 cows. 2 of them lost calves. That's 20%. Well, we had 20 confirmed depredations that year. We lost 70 head of calves that never came home. 5 cows, 2 yearlings, and a bull. You figure that all out, the losses could be 20%. Pretty easy. The wolf came into these close contacts 54 times. And you remember the cows are being collared recorded every 5 minutes, the wolf every 15. So there could be a lot more close encounter. This shows the first 2 weeks after the wolf was collared, he stayed a long ways away from everybody. Okay, the following weeks, he was coming into direct contact with those cows. All the different colors are the different collared cows. He came into contact with every single one of the collared cows the following 2 weeks after he was collared. And so we were trying to check some of our data and figure out what's going on. And so we took those points where they came into direct contact and they went back the following year, because each one of their GPS points, you can come right to it within 3 meters of it. And so they went back the following year to those. And at the third site they went to, they found these bones from a cow from the year before. Now that don't prove that the wolves killed the cow, but isn't it ironic that you had a pinpoint that the wolf came into contact the exact same time as a collared cow, and at that point there's a set of bones. Now that, I got to go right along. A lot of these things that come up, we was working out of Montana State University. They developed a program that showed potential rendezvous sites through imagery. And so we decided, let's take their data, since we've got hard data, and see how it fits. And so on the left, it shows how that system works. On the right is the potential rendezvous sites for our area. So that would be McCall, Cascade Lake, and then we're over in this area. All right, so we overlay the data, and I think the brown is the proposed rendezvous sites from that computer program that was developed. The red is our actual GPS points of the wolf. Okay, so why is this important to you folks? We can take a picture of your ground, we can lay that on and show you the potential rendezvous sites that the wolves are going to hang out in your area. And it's going to be pretty darn accurate. So when somebody says, well, they're never going to be here, and they're never going to affect me, with that computer program and stuff, we can say, oh, yes, they might. And right along with that is the connected rendezvous sites and the wolf and the cow interaction points. So it's reasonably accurate. And this is just examples of that program working. Here's another one of those creatures. We came by, quick little story, we were on seeing if all the snow drifts were going so we could start working on some fence. And we looked over and we could see this wolf leaving, and he's all covered with blood. And so we kind of go back, there was a rig back there a ways, and couldn't figure out what the deal was. We got looking around, and out of this bush is this telephoto lens about this big. Well, he was a bird watcher. He was checking out some woodpeckers, and he kind of started tooting his little whistle, and a pack of 4 wolves come in on him, held him off for 15 minutes or something, just like from me to you guys, because he had a dog with him. And then he didn't have any clue that they just had this fresh elk killed there. In a matter of 4 hours, my wife and I came back on a reconnaissance mission, and that was like you go back to the house and get a bigger gun. Came back, and this elk, which you can see there, is pretty complete. When we came back, all that was left was a picked clean rib cage in a 4-hour period. This is what we started seeing on our ranch and couldn't figure out. We was trying to blame it on other things. As we started gathering these cattle, we'd start seeing these abscesses and bite marks. This big abscess right there on the front leg, and something going on there. Bite marks on the back of these calves. This calf had a big abscess there on the front leg. He also had a big abscess on his back leg. We ended up saving this calf. We didn't get any compensation for it because he lived. And the following year, we brought him up to the ranch and had him on a nice irrigated pasture there, and the wolves came in and killed him the second year. And then you have ones like this, that it gets so deep in that we doctored this calf for about a month and finally had to put him down. You know, it's just heartbreaking because we really should just put them down right off the bat. We end up saving a few, but at the time, Defenders of Wildlife was paying for some of the compensation. Of course, they backed out of their agreement, and then it got turned over to the state. And the federal government issued some money, and now this last year we got 0 compensation because they transferred the funds. Used to go through Denver and then to the state. They switched it, and the funds went go to Portland, and then it's supposed to go back to the state. Well, once they got to Portland, they never left. And so on all of our confirmed depredations last year, we received no compensation at all. And it's not that we want compensation, we just want to be able to do what we do, and that's raise cattle. Another one of those abscesses, and it just goes on and on. This here is a wolf scat, that's a hoof, that's a dew claw, and this hair is black. And in case any of you guys don't know, this is what we classified as CAB. That's Certified Angus Beef. And going right through this, here is a 400-pound calf. This is a couple days before elk season. This is right off of a main graveled Forest Service road that all the hunters are driving up and down. We had a hunter stop. We were working at the corrals. I sent my guys up with a tarp, and they tarped this calf down, as you can see. In about an hour and a half, my wife and I went back with the GPS and camera and stuff to take pictures. And the wolves that came back right along that road with the elk hunters driving up and down and drug it out from underneath the tarp. And you cover them up with the tarp to preserve the evidence. And we didn't think there was a chance that there was enough left to get a confirmation on this kill. But as we skin this back, the government trapper skinned it back, you see that's the side of its head right here. And if you see, this is all that bloodshot area that would prove, with the spacing of the canine teeth and wolf scat, wolf tracks around it, that's all the things you need to get a confirmation. And yet, that's what we needed. And if we wouldn't have went back and covered this up, and if my wife and I wouldn't have went up and gathered it up on the tarp and hauled it to the barn, we wouldn't have got a confirmation on this, because all the evidence would have been ate. So how did the wolves kill this calf? Well, right there and right there is a fang mark on the top of the pole of a 400-pound calf. The wolf grabbed that calf by the top of the pole and underneath its ear and ripped half of the skull off in one bite. This is another calf about 3 days later from that other one. And some hunters seen 3 wolves chasing half a dozen cows, and this calf was kind of lagging behind, and they was able to chase the wolves off, and then we was able to get it in. And, you know, it's just a real sad deal. One of the other things that come out of our study, just I thought it would be interesting, is you hear all this about riparian areas and how the cattle are depredating all the riparian areas. We had a graduate student out of La Grande with Oregon State University that's seen this cow data, and he was in the stream and water management thing. And he says, man, I can use that data. So he went and pulled up the USGS stream layers. And of course, these don't even classify as femoral arteries. These are, you know, they're intermediate. You know, they dry up. And yet he used that as if they were live streams. And so you can take the cow dots out of so many meters away from the stream and figure out how much time that the cattle spend in that area. And guess what? The cattle spend less than 1% of their time in a riparian area. 1%. You know, that's 0.5%. I think the following year, this is the following year, 0.8% of their time in a riparian area. And so this just turns everything up on end from the argument of fencing off riparian areas and everything else. So, and one of the interesting things with the program that he developed, he drew a line across there, across that stream. And then this is the profile of that stream. And it makes a huge difference how the steepness of the stream and things like that. So I threw that in just real quick, just to show you that some of this information can be useful. You know, the cows, they tend to be where the forage is. That's amazing. That's a new concept. So these are some of the things to consider with the compensation program. I've talked about direct losses from the depredation. That is the least loss that you're going to experience from a producer standpoint. Loss of body condition. Our cows come off of our summer range a full body score less. And a mature cow, that's basically 100 pounds. Conception rate. We went from the mid-90s on the conception rate to as low as 82% in a conception rate. These cows are constantly moving. They're always under stress. The cow behavior, extremely hard to handle. And you know, in our country, we need to use dogs, and it just makes it about impossible anymore. I talked about the cattle distribution and your range use. You get increased labor costs, the stress on the animals and the humans, increased culling. It just goes on and on. In 2009, the closest estimate I've come to on our ranch alone, our losses would have been close to $250,000. This just shows some of the losses up in Alberta, and between 2001, they were paying out $45,000 in losses. In 2009, $110,000. So in a 10-year period, basically totally doubles. This is, we had kind of an open winter, and we had a herd of about 27 head of horses out in a 600-acre pasture. And my wife went out and found one of the horses on the wrong side of the fence, and a bunch of fence tore down. And there was a little skip of snow on the ground, and you could just read the story in the snow. There was five wolves got these these horses bunched up against the fence and took them down through the fence. And actually her horse, not this one, but a different one, is the one that went through the fence. This horse has bite marks on its shoulder, its back leg, front leg. You couldn't even get around this horse. I mean, we finally got him caught after we had all the other horses caught, and couldn't even hardly get him loaded in the stock trailer. So there we are with good grass, good open winter, and we can't even use our own property because of these wolves. So, you know, this is what we like, kind of the nice, tranquil, taking a break, eating your lunch, letting your dogs rest, green grass. You don't want to have this with your dog. This was another person's dog that they were using, and all of a sudden the dog's gone, and when they find it, it's dead. And if you'll notice, there is no bite marks through the hide, but look at the damage done from this wolf taking out this border collie. You know, that's its back right there. Just the bloodshot and the trauma underneath is just horrible. So that's what you don't want to end up with. There's some of our acknowledgments of the people that's involved, and I hope that somewhere down the line some of this will come in handy.
Thank you, Casey. That certainly demonstrates the kinds of issues that are being faced throughout the West. The East has other issues, but in the West, predators like these wolves are part of the problems that we're facing, increasingly face as time moves along.